If someone would call a roll. Or
Hoy.
we'll just identify ourselves. Bennett,
Lewis,
and Hoy.
I said Hoy. Yeah.
You say Hoy? Okay, very soft spoken.
Always.
And staff to be identified. Okay, let's go, Justin. What do you got?
Hey, thanks, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Nice to see you. Long time no see. Nice to see Courtney in her house. All warm, not in a car, truck. I don't have much for a legislative update today. We've got quite a few bills that I know we want to go through. So I will just say the legislature is kind of slowly grinding away at their business. As people have heard me say, they're looking at a ton of stuff, but between the virtualness of a virtual session and this ice storm and people with power and internet issues, even the hearings that are going on, they're not moving a lot of bills. So they're waiting for people to actually have the opportunity to either testify, submit, before they're getting ready to move bills. So that process that we talked about, where they're getting a whole host of things, then maybe coming in, doing their stuff on the floor, then getting back out, even that's been pushed back a little bit. So we got a little bit of breathing room. We've got a bill that you'll hear about that's coming up that's very important to us, that we'll talk about when the time is there. But other than that, that is where we're at. A little bit of the ethics stuff has been going on in evenings during hearings, and there might be some disciplinary action taken with a certain representative here next week that will then free up the calendar for folks that have been concentrating on that. And that's been a real issue early in session. So with that, Mr. Mayor, that's the quick legislative wrap. As everybody knows, it's not like normal. I can't just park outside of Ways and Means like I usually do, or sit in the coffee shop and poke fun at all my colleagues like normal. And Councilor Hoy used to see me down there every time he was in the building. So I'm missing a little of that. And frankly, I don't get as much information that I could relay back to you all because I'm not getting that kind of information now. So the virtualness of this has it created some difficulties. That being said, I'm really pretty confident that our narrow scope on funding is looking pretty good. So I'm excited about that and look forward to that.
Great.
So hand it back.
Very good. So we've got these priority bills. Courtney, do you want to take us through this and we'll see where we are?
Yes, I'd love to. I'm going to be tapping on folks as we go through, and
Sure.
I want to apologize right off. I noticed some of the bills came through in the packet without a statement, and that's all on me. I
Without what?
apologize.
Without a what? We lost
Some
you
of
there.
some of the bills came through without a statement or missing
Oh,
a
okay.
statement, and that's all on me. The screen and COVID eyes and all that, it just didn't go as well and as smoothly as we would like, but I'll just run through them for you. So
Okay.
2004 is the vehicle for funding the Navigation Center in Salem. So that's on your docket for today to consider. We have two bills next that I want to talk about regarding land division. These are two bills that you have already forwarded to the council for approval, but they were coming up in our conversation, so we wanted just to bring them back in case you want to change the position. The bills are House Bill 2283 and Senate Bill 458. Those bills were approved on January 25th by the City Council for opposition with a level of 1, which means the mayor and council can provide testimony. If you have any questions about those, I would defer to Eunice.
Will we then, on these bills, I assume that Eunice or you will be, or Justin will be watching this closely for amendments as we start seeing amendments that make these more acceptable. I mean, 2283 is something we generally, it sort of sounds good, understand there are probably technical issues, probably the same on 2307, but if those technical issues are resolved, isn't there an underlying policy that the council supports there that would bring it back to us so we can work on it some more? Do it again, like support it?
Eunice, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's right, Mayor. We have been working on the technical aspects of
Okay.
it to make sure it's tight, it makes sense, we can actually implement it with the League of Oregon Cities, the Home Builders and Habitat. And so
Okay.
there has been one amendment. It is getting better, but we anticipate future amendments. So we can bring that back if you'd like to see that when it's.
Yeah, I would hate to have us go in opposition right out of the chute without, if you're going to send one of us in, without understanding where we are in the amendment process, that maybe having you guys working at toward the amendments, that your testimony would be, we support the bill with the following amendments or something like that. Is that the concept you want to go with?
Yeah, I think we've been clear that we support the intent. It falls in line with affordable housing, particularly for home ownership.
Yeah.
It's just the implementation and some of the technical aspects.
Well, that's why I think sending it to council with an oppose might be a strong statement. This would put us at odds almost with our own policy. So I'm wondering if we couldn't say support with amendments. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that would be I just suggest that might be the change here, because these get out, these position statements, and I'm not sure we want to oppose this bill. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that if that makes sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Justin?
Mr. Mayor, if I
We
can.
can take that position forward. Sorry, just a minute, Justin. If that's the will of the council's committee, we can take that position forward with an amendment. Justin?
Thanks, Courtney. Eunice, while we got you here, are you confident in home builders and other interests getting those amendments into the package?
Yeah, they've been working really closely with LOC and with cities. So I think so. There's good
Okay.
intentions.
Well, committee, what do you think? Could we look at a support? Okay, we're okay with that. If
Yeah.
you don't mind, then support with amendments which suggests oppose without, but we don't say it.
Excellent.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, hey, Eunice, are you also confident that Eugene and other
Careful.
Let's just stick with Eugene. Are you confident with those amendments that Eugene gets to yes?
I think so. Eugene's been working really closely on it.
Yeah.
Eugene has a problem with this?
A lot of
in the
cities.
current form, I think they're in the same
Oh,
position.
sure. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So I got a text yesterday from Ethan at Eugene.
Yeah.
Boy, we just hate this. Are you guys in the same position we are? And so that's why I'm just trying to check, in that conversation as a similar size city, if we can get to there and you're confident that they can get to yes too, that would be good. That'd be helpful.
Chris,
I mean,
did you want to?
Oh, go ahead.
No, okay. Go ahead, Eunice.
I was just gonna say I can't speak for all of Salem or all of Eugene, but I know that their staff is working very closely on the amendments and thinks we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah,
you.
let's, maybe this, I think we're going to have to, yeah, if it's okay, then it looks like the committee agrees that we will go ahead, support with amendments, with the understanding you'll report back to us if we have to change our position. We want to be right on top of it. Okay, great. And 2307.
2307, that's a bill that has come across Salem Housing Authority's radar, and I see that we don't have a staff person right here, so I will try to summarize at a high level. The concern is that House Bill 2307 puts either housing authorities or our own urban development group in a position of approving any rent increases of 10% or more by a landlord. And the concern is that that's a really big bite for staff to take on. And Oregon Housing is already doing this work.
Yeah.
Approving or denying all rent increases also potentially puts us in a position of conflict if it is Salem Housing Authority, because Salem Housing Authority is doing so much great work to bring in more and more landlords to help with Section 8 housing and vouchers and our homeless rental assistance program. So we're not sure as written that it really works for Salem if it is indeed the housing authority that would take on that role or urban development. So those are our concerns right now as written, and that's why you see the position you do. If you'd like us to consider something different, we'd be happy to.
Chris, what do you think?
Well, I have concerns about it, definitely. So I think watching it and trying, are we actively working on it to try to share those concerns and get our amendments in place? Or I also would have just a fundamental issue with the unfunded mandate. Like they're going to push work on us that we can't afford to do. So there, I also have that concern in addition to the regulatory part of it.
Jim,
Are we
did you have
working
some
on the
thoughts
bill?
on it? Oh, sorry.
Courtney, I don't know.
no.
Are we working on this at all? Or are we participating, or are we just standing back?
We're watching. Our practice is to take these issues before the committee so that we know what room we have to work within as we are advocating on one way or another. So I know we're watching it carefully, but getting in on the advocacy level is really where we come to you for information about your position, and then we take that to the city council, and that gives us the space within which to operate. Unfunded mandate is an easy place for us to go to, and that is part of the policy statements. So we can do that easily. But if there was something particular about this bill that you wanted us to be addressing or fighting for with regard to amendments, that's where we would take your insights and add those into our position for the bill.
I don't know. Does this get us into the rent control business? I mean, would the council or the housing authority or the urban renewal agency be suddenly into the business of approving rent increases? I'm not sure I understand. Or if they're below 10%, they're fine. They can do anything they want, which is pretty reasonable. But if it's above, you have to do some kind of findings. I'm not sure I understand it.
That's the first read that we have as well. Is it creates some confusion. It's an unfunded mandate, and that it appears as though anything over 10% would have to fall to some new authority, which may reside with urban development or Salem Housing Authority for approval.
And Jessica was also talking about the relationships that housing authorities built over the years. How does that affect, or how does that impact? I mean,
And relies on.
Yeah, I mean, the other
Yeah.
key here is even if we don't have to take these positions formally either. I mean, I understand you as a council, but we can also say we got some real concerns, and you can turn me loose to go have those conversations about those concerns without us having an official position. So feel free to, that if
That's
you
what I
want.
was wondering, Justin. Are you working on this at all? Are you talking to people? Like, are we doing anything to like make?
Yeah, now that I've got the analysis from Jessica, we can certainly start having those conversations with committee members and other interests. So
Yeah.
without having an established position, which is just as good.
I think getting some of this detail, is it a housing authority? Is it rent control for private and public? Is it what are the findings you'd have to make? What's it look like in terms of a process for us? That could put us in a real bind, particularly as we're working with landlords trying to create additional housing opportunities for low and no income residents. There are just some other things might be worth looking at along the way. So
We could leave that as a watch and just be mindful of.
Okay, 2398.
2398 is the building codes one that we were asked to bring forward. And Eunice, do you want to speak to that at all?
I know Tom and I have both expressed support outside of this venue for the concept, and I know Tom feels Tom would like to go testify on this. So I think a 1 is the appropriate support. I know home builders are concerned about it. I think anything that adds cost to home building generally they will be concerned about, if not opposed. And I've talked with Mike Erdman. This is one of those, it's a cost factor. It's just part of the changes that are occurring heading forward in the cost of buildings these days. So
I'm unfamiliar with this bill, and I know that Tom in his email that he sent to us this morning mentioned that the mayor and he had been working on it. Can you or somebody kind of give me the common sense description of the bill?
well, what it does is set standards for home construction generally. This is how I understand it, okay? Generally, it sets standards for home construction that are going to make it a much more climate-friendly outcome. It's going to have higher levels of insulation, certain kinds of building materials, things like that. It dips into the home construction area, much like climate change legislation or ideas dip into other issue areas. If you want to hear some of the problems, Mike Erdman is a good guy to listen to on this stuff. I mean, he's not hysterical about it or anything. He's just, he's concerned. I think as long as we're moving forward on a climate action plan, this made sense to me that the council has indicated a real desire to set up various elements of our public policy and actually outcomes that affect climate change. This is one of those. This is what it looks like.
Yeah. Okay, I'll voice what I will call a concern, and I'll go back to what I heard Representative Moore Green say this morning, is that her concern is the bills that are going to increase costs, fees, or whatever, are something that she's concerned about. Not that I'm against the idea of it, but we're talking on one hand about affordable housing. We're talking on another hand about something that will clearly increase cost of housing. For me, it's a matter of timing. Is this a necessity? Is it something that we want to go to the mat on and add that to our primary list, as opposed to what we've been focusing on up to this point?
Yeah.
And Mr. Mayor here and Councilor Lewis, the status I have, the political status is the committee might not have the votes to move it right now. And there's going to be more hearings. So we've got a little time on this bill. And as everybody knows, we can also catch things on the other side if we need to. But again, figuring out when to weigh in, when not to. We've got a little time on this.
Yeah, I will remind you, Councilor Anderson is very, very supportive of this approach. And I tend to kind of, if a counselor has real strong feelings, just personally, I tend to kind of like to support their feelings and let them proceed, and they become the face of us if we as a council support it. I mean, I understand that, but I want to make this available to him if possible to be a participant. I think that's most of what I really think he's interested in, and I wish he was here, is being kind of at the table. I think we would like to have us be at the table as this bill's being discussed. And the best way to get to the table for us would be a support. It sort of gives him some status as one of the people who is willing to work on putting a bill like this together. But I certainly understand if there's other concerns. I mean, there will be some costs in housing. Every change that goes on in building codes adds cost. I mean, it always does. It's often driven by just suppliers. I've been to some of those hearings nationally where they look at these building code issues. It's generally suppliers are showing up asking to have some sort of exclusive ability to put their door handle into the doors because they make a better door handle, that kind of stuff. So I that's about all I can say about it at this point. I just want to
Uh,
remind you of Anderson's interest.
Yeah, one more thing, if I could, at least for me, it would be enlightening to see, because we talk about increased costs. What are those? I mean, could we
Right.
take example of a typical house? What would be the additional cost and what would it be for?
Yeah.
That specific information would certainly help me and I think others come to a conclusion.
Well, and that it be upfront along with, and this is part of the look at the climate action plan, is what's it do for resiliency? What's the long-term savings that occur as well with higher quality insulation, higher quality windows, or more protective against outside environment that keep it warmer inside or whatever. But Chris, what do you think? What's your?
Yeah, I support it, and I think we should be at the table. It goes right along with what we're doing with the climate action plan, and I hear Jim's concerns, but I feel like it's the direction we need to head.
Yeah, I hear exactly the same thing. I hear your concerns. I tend to be very sympathetic to affordable housing ought to be built affordably to make it affordable. But I think we also have to recognize we have taken we're taking a road down the climate change discussion, and I think we want to be participants. And I really think that's what we're really talking about here, is being serious participants in this discussion. So I'm one of those who believes it's very hard to get to the table from opposition. It's much easier to get to the table from support and be able to then add and change things at that point. So I can kind of understand why support would be the better approach. What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, makes sense.
So do we want to send this to the council? I think that's what Tom's asking us to do.
Let me ask
I
a
am
question.
too.
Let me ask a question. If we were to, and I'm just learning the number system, but if we were to do support 2, does that allow us to be at the table, or does that diminish what we can do?
It
Which one's that now?
It wouldn't allow Tom to go and speak on behalf of the city. I don't think he could still go in his individual capacity as a counselor, but I don't think that we would be supporting public testimony on our behalf, as I understand it.
I would really suggest that we have put ourselves on the record for climate change. We're headed down that road. We are working on that issue in our climate action plan. This is one of the elements of that plan is this kind of change. I think if we were to take this to the council without a support, Tom will make a motion to support it and it will pass. That's the other thing. I think that's what this council is all about, is this kind of activity.
And with this legislative makeup, we're not gonna lose any political credibility or any political capital supporting something like this. And again, I always refer to Eunice on the technicalities of it, but it wouldn't hurt us in the eyes of the majority parties in both chambers to be supportive of something like this.
Yeah, I don't think we're way out there on this. This is not a far out bill or proposal. This is pretty, there's usually bills like this in. This one just happens to have its focus on the resiliency of housing and climate change as one of the factors in its resiliency. So why don't we, unless you just, Jim, do you want to move it forward? Would you mind if we move it forward?
No, I'm fine with that.
Okay, great. Why don't we then send that to council as is, support 1, and we'll kind of recognize Councilor Anderson to talk about it. He really knows it much, much better than I do. Okay.
The next one is House Bill 2417, and that's mobile crisis response.
Yes.
We talked about it a little bit last time we got together. And so this is a bill that, in addition to establishing a framework with a whole bunch of specificity about who's in the bus and all of that, it also would give a grant, a $10 million grant source for communities to meet prerequisites like having a sobering center. So it gives us a lot of opportunity to build out that full system that we've talked about.
Great.
It's as I understand it, and I'm not sure which part of this it applies to, but it's a 50% match. Is that for the mobile response part of it, or is that for the other infrastructure part, or all of it?
I don't have a 50% in my notes. I'm operating completely on paper, so I don't see that in my notes. If it's there, I'm sure it's true.
I just read that in the bill, but I wasn't clear what it referred to.
Well, it indicates, your notes indicate a matching grant after July 1st.
Right.
With the source from the 10 million being available for some of the prerequisites. If the sobering center is a prerequisite, it kind of all adds up to this might be available for the sobering center.
Mm-hmm. Help us get to meet the threshold so that we could go after this for a mobile crisis response.
Right.
It's a good question, Councilor Hoy. I'm sorry I don't have the detail in front of me about where the match applies. If it's to the 10 million grant source for sobering, or if it's to the mobile crisis.
Well, could we give it a support one with, we'd really love to see it have funds available along with the unit, the place to take them. That supportive services is something we'd really like to see eligible for grant funding as well.
Yeah,
something like that.
Regardless, we need to support it, I think.
You need what?
Regardless of the detail, we need to support this bill.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would think this will get strong support from us. This is exactly the kind of stuff we're talking about.
Excellent.
Okay.
We have two historic bills, House Bill 2447 and Senate Bill 108. And Eunice, could you speak a little bit to those, please?
Sure. The first one, Senate Bill or House Bill 2447, would just extend the date to which this tax assessments could apply. We have 18 properties that take advantage of this. And it's one of the few kind of preservation tools that we have. And so we want to support that. Senate Bill 108 does extend the timeline, but it limits it to commercial properties. And so it takes out residential properties as being eligible. And so we wanted to support it with the amendment that residential is not taken out. So our historic preservation officer is interested in this bill, obviously.
We okay with that?
Is this something that staff would testify in support of, or would offer something in writing, or would you be expecting one of us?
We could do that. I can talk to Kimberly if you think it's at staff level.
Well, why don't you kind of evaluate it? If you need one of us, we can do it, but it sounds like more of a staff sending in like Kimberly maybe to explain those properties and why they're so important.
Okay.
We can say it, but it also helps if you have somebody with a degree and some sort of.
Somebody who knows a little bit about it.
Okay.
knows
Sounds
anything.
good.
Since we
Okay.
lost Kaiser, we don't really have that.
Yeah, we don't have it without her.
Okay.
Okay, great.
The next one is House Bill 2488. And that was something that we took to council. It's about climate. It's the climate justice bill. We took that to council with a watch and a 1 on January 25th. And this bill has come up in conversation amongst the legislative committee, and we just wondered whether you wanted to consider altering that position. Right now, we're just watching it. It's about complying with statewide planning goals on climate change. If you would like to change that position and we could forward that back to the council, we're open.
Is there anything that's changed in that time? Is there anything that's would alter our position that's come up?
I don't think anything specific. Again, it's still early days, but if you wanted us to be, again, back to the position of, climate action planning and all the other work we're doing in the community, if you want to change that to a support, this would be the opportunity. We know it's been coming up a lot in conversation and just wondered if it was coming up because you wanted to reconsider the watch to a support. That's why.
Thank you.
What's this mean? What's it mean? What's it do?
Thank God we got Eunice here.
Yeah.
So this would be an update to our statewide planning goals, our land use planning goals to
Oh, so it'll be
integrate
goal
climate.
12 or whatever.
It could either be an update to all the goals with a climate equity, environmental justice lens, or a new goal. And so there's a lot of discussions right now with DLCD and et cetera about kind of what that looks like.
So
But
it'd
it
be
does
one
re-
of your findings in a land use decision where you claim that here's your finding regarding climate justice. Is that it?
Well, we would also have to update our comprehensive plan or land use regulations, aligning with whatever they adopt as they update the rules. And there's a lot around analysis as well, analysis on health impacts and things like that. So it would be new, but I think it's in line with our goals around GHG reduction.
Yeah.
Does
So
the league have a position on this bill at all? Where are they at with this?
I'm not sure if they've taken a formal position. I've talked to Ariel, and there's some concerns on the implementation and the time frames in terms of city actually updating to align with new goals and things like that.
Huh. Well, we could watch it. I mean,
Yeah, it's in-
but let's make sure we watch it enough that we can take a position when we need to.
Okay.
It hasn't been scheduled, Mr. Mayor, and then it's got to go down to Ways and Means. So we've got a couple cracks at it, whether we get it in the initial committee or we submit something to Ways and Means once it gets down there. So we've got a little time. It's got to go through that process.
Okay.
I think
I
that's
think
a good-
understanding what it means, it will be better, and costs. I mean, if there's, okay, what's your next one?
We have two on ratepayer assistance, and so I'm going to ask Jason to address those. It's House Bill 2739 and House Bill 3089. Jason Pulley?
Yeah, those are identical bills. One was introduced as a committee bill, and the other by Representative Leaf. But essentially, it looks to establish a statewide utility ratepayer assistance fund, similar to what we do as a city already. But this would be a state-funded and state-led effort that any of our customers could apply to for ratepayer assistance.
Hey,
Did have a
their
hearing.
money, their program, right?
Yeah, and a couple of key points is they're trying to get something established pretty quickly to handle the federal money that's coming in, and then the long-term goal of standing up a permanent program that's directly funded by the state.
Sounds great.
Jason, Mr. Mayor, if I could, Jason, how's
Yeah.
that? You're sitting on a task force. Does it seem to be pretty nonpartisan? Are people getting along, you think?
Yeah, it's going really well. So we have representatives from community support organizations as well as water providers, and we're just scheduling our next meeting for the end of this month. So we're looking to have something to take back to the House Committee on Water probably towards the end of the session.
Why are these ones? What's the rationale there? I'm just curious. I mean, why wouldn't we have Jason get up and?
Well, it gives us we retain the option of having you or another counselor go and testify if we need that kind of support, but it also allows.
Okay, it doesn't mean we have to have somebody go, right?
Correct.
Okay. Is everybody okay with
Again,
those?
if you would prefer that staff take care of it, you can just leave it as a 2. It's entirely up to you.
Well, they're both ones right now. The main thing is if it's just you want to have the option of having one of the electeds get up and talk about it or make a mistake, that's your call. Good luck. You might want to, I would really suggest you think about those ones all the time. I noticed they're all ones today, that sometimes having the expert get up is a lot better than having one of us get up. So, but I hear what you're saying. If you need somebody, just call Lewis. He's glad to do these all.
I'd be happy to testify on these ratepayer assistance ones.
Yeah. I mean, these are just they're so easy. They're positive. I mean, it's just a positive. Hey, I want to give people your money. That's a great deal for us.
And then, Mr. Mayor, I can always deal with the committee administrator. Sometimes, obviously, we want the expert up there, but sometimes for optics and the politics, they want an elected
Right.
official. If that's the case, then I will let Courtney and Jason know that, and then we defer to one of the council members.
Well, on these, I think you may have every counselor want to come, because these are really these are really a gimme. That's great. You need more bills like that. Okay.
Yeah.
The
108.
The next one is is House Bill 2205. I think we already covered 108. So if it's okay with you, I would ask Mark Weinstein to help me explain this public enforcement.
Which one's this now?
It's House Bill 2205.
Yeah, I read this and I still am not sure what it does.
That's why we have Mark.
Let's get a lawyer on it. That'll unconfuse things.
Yeah.
We're not hearing you, Mark.
Hear your voice, but we can see your lips.
That's a lawyer.
It's
Yeah.
perfect.
Go ahead.
Better lawyer.
Forgive me, there's about 6 different settings I have to adjust on this computer. Technology is great except when it's not. So what this bill does is creates a private right of action where private citizens or certain nonprofit organizations can initiate a civil lawsuit in the name of the state of Oregon against entities and individuals that the person initiating the action believes is violating state law. So instead of the Attorney General's office or an administrative agency initiating the action, if a private citizen feels that the state isn't being the watchdog that they're supposed to be, they follow certain procedural steps, they can initiate a private right of action. Obviously, the legal department's very concerned about how this may open the floodgates for litigation. I believe the city is very responsive when we have any communications with the state. I don't know of there being any situations where we've received, I'm not aware of any situations where the state is claiming we're in violation of some type of regulatory control or state law. But should there be those, I'm confident that the city would be very responsive. This is just going to be one of those situations where individuals have the ability to initiate legal action without going through sort of all of the policies and procedures and historical processes in line that state agencies and the state have in their relationships with individuals and other entities. Additionally,
Before we spend too much time on this, Mark,
Sure.
Could I just defer to Justin for 1 second? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm noticing that this is a one representative sponsor. There's no co-sponsors, and it's probably not somebody with a lot of pull. I'm thinking the chance of this bill going anywhere or somewhere between slim and none. So I'm not sure we need to spend a ton of time on it. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Who is this? Who's bringing this thing?
I've got Representative Wild, who is a chairman, and then I've got Barbara Smith Warner on the bill, and she's
Okay. Is
Oh,
this
really?
a-
I did not see that. I apologize.
yeah. So it might have a little more legs than we think.
Yeah. Well, do they have a specific problem they're pointing to? I mean, have they got a problem up in Portland or Eugene that they're looking at? Or, I mean, what I'm trying to understand is what's the difference between this and kind of and I may get the term wrong because I'm not a lawyer, but like a mandamus action or something like that, just saying, city, do what you're supposed to do. I mean, get you into court that way. I don't understand the private. Don't they have access to us if we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing?
Perhaps an injunctive relief action or something like that.
Yeah.
Mayor, I don't know what the situation is that is prompting this bill, but I do know that we are concerned because it does not prevent lawsuits against other government agencies like the city in the name of the state of Oregon. And it also makes provisions for the private individual to retain a certain amount of any civil damages that are awarded. It also gives them an opportunity to remain anonymous in certain situations.
What's an example? Can you just give us a real simple real life? What would this look like in a real life example that would be common, of some sort that might be common? I mean, I'm thinking of like an ADA or what
any state law or regulation that they feel that the city is not in compliance of, everything from the ADA to an environmental regulation to water controls, water monitoring, you name it. And that's another concern. There is no limitation, any violation of state law or regulation. This would allow for a private individual to bring a enforcement action in the name of the state of Oregon.
And that's the operative part. It's in the name of the state of Oregon rather than in their name. In other words, they can sue us.
Yes.
But this allows them to sue us as the state?
Yes.
Okay. No, you're right. You guys got this one right. This is a no, I would think.
Absolutely.
What
But this bill's not going anywhere. I can't believe that.
I can't either.
That it's not going to pass the constitutional test, is it? You can't sue on somebody else's behalf.
Where's the attorney general on this thing? Is Ellen going to come in and say, hey, I've got a bunch of really high priced lawyers that know how to do this, rather than turning it over to some guy down the street that hung out a shingle and finds himself a client? I mean, this is just wacky.
Again, Mr. Mayor, I am not sure what the situation was that brought this to the level of legislation.
Maybe we could hear some more about this. We just leave this off the list completely. Let's not trouble the council with this one yet. Would that be okay? Mm-hmm. Just to kind of get a real feel for, mainly out of deference for Barbara and her putting her name on this thing. I'd like to know what prompted her.
Well, she's not on that. When you hit the hyperlink, she's not on this bill that I see.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I've got it in my notes that she is. Maybe she's not. I'll try to get some more scoop, Mr. Mayor. And then maybe Mark, you talk to your colleagues over at the league.
Who's bringing this, Chris? Who've you got?
Wild is the only person.
Okay. Yeah, let's see what happens here. And I'm not sure we ought to bring it up.
Yeah, for some reason I had BSW Representative Smith Warner on my notes. So that if that's not right, I'll try to get some scoop. I could even talk to Ellen if we need to.
Just see what's going on.
In general, if we need to.
Yeah.
And then maybe Mark, when you talk to your colleagues, either Department of Justice or League of Cities, whoever the attorneys are that you deal with over there, we'll try to get some more information.
Yeah, but just, we think it's pretty bad as it sits right now. We just I'd like to understand it a little better. Who's doing it? 3124.
This one is just right now at a watch, and this has to do with a 72-hour posting, going from 24 hours to 72 hours posting before we can consider helping people move from camps that are established in our community. And so right now we just have it as a watch because we're not sure about all of the impacts with regard to storing of property and those other things, how those things would be influenced. But it's really, again, we defer to you and how you want to approach the bill. I see Mark's coming up and maybe he has more specifics. I just have this high level overview from a conversation I had with Deb earlier. So Mark, anything specific to outline? Again, Mark, you have wonderful movement of mouth, but not sound.
Hopefully you can hear me now.
Yes.
So under the current state of the law, the city is required to give individuals 24-hour notice before removing an established campsite existing on city property unless there is criminal activity or an emergent need to do so in a shorter period of time. we have to maintain and store any personal property, which is property that can be identified as belonging to an individual and has utility. So not rubbish, but items, backpacks, things like that. Then we have to store it for a period of 30 days. I've had an opportunity to work with the Police Department and Public Works in a few of these situations. They do a tremendous job posting these sites and maintaining the property and giving individuals notice on where to retrieve, how to go about retrieving this. But what this bill is going to do is extend that period of time from 24 hours to 72 hours of the notice. So a substantial increase in the notification period, as well as require the city to store the property that's removed from the campsites, from extending it from 30 days to 90 days. So tripling the period of time, which is well in excess of what state law currently requires before we can dispose of unclaimed property, which I believe is currently 30 days. So, you know, I understand all of the efforts that the city is currently taking to recognize and help unsheltered individuals, but this is going to have some substantial impacts on the burdens of the city, both in the notification requirements and then on the backside, the period of time that we have to store these property if it's unclaimed by the individuals who might have an interest in it.
I don't know.
Right
I
now,
don't understand why we don't oppose it, but
well, if you, that's where we're looking for your guidance. If you'd like us to, we can.
Well, I'm fine with leaving it the way it is now. I mean, we're early in the process, but as a practical matter, the city of Salem doesn't act on these situations unless we absolutely have to. And so I think the current rule is satisfactory for what we need.
Yeah, I'm fine with just watching it for an hour or just being neutral on it. I don't think it's going to have any practical impact on us ultimately, but I'm happy to just keep watching it for now.
okay. Okay, we'll just leave it as it is. Okay, 3005.
3005 and Senate Bill 585 both are about firearms, and you'll see a neutral position that we put forward, and you'll also see Councilor Anderson express some concern about retaining a neutral position. And
Yeah.
this I have a recollection of a conversation that we had over the summer, perhaps legislative committee meeting, where many of you were expressing concerns about getting involved or engaged in this firearm conversation at a local level. And so that's why you'll see the neutral position. We wanted you to have a conversation amongst yourselves and be clear about how you wanted to proceed. And we'll be happy to put forward, any position that you wish. But it is a challenging and touchy area and open for potential litigation moving forward. So up to you.
All this does would allow us to regulate what goes on in our city. It doesn't require us to do anything. And it's certainly an area that's had a lot of public concern recently, especially related to our parks. I think we should be supporting this bill.
It's also sponsored by Clem.
And as a result of conversations with several of us, he reached out to us over the course of the last few months, and we've been having conversations with him. I think this is one we should support.
I don't. I think this puts us into a position we just can't defend, or we will spend a lot of money trying to defend. I think this going into firearms regulation for local government, I think all you have to do is look at the success in Washington, D.C. or some of these other places that took a run at this and got nowhere. I just don't see us being able to do it. I would love to do something about the open carry of firearms, take a look at that at a statewide level. But I think when you get down to it and create, what can you do inside the city, outside the city, all that I think gets very very, very iffy as to whether we can defend that action.
Well, I agree that it would be ideal if the legislature did their job.
Had the guts to do it.
Right.
Right.
I
Yeah,
agree.
and that's my problem. I think it's great of Brian to give us the problem. He's got the problem and he ought to deal with it, and he apparently doesn't want to. He just wants to hand it to us. And I don't see us taking the responsibility to go in and regulate that kind of an issue when the state is reluctant to do it. And my first question to Brian, he didn't talk to me about it, but would be, well, Brian, if you feel so strongly, why the heck don't you give yourself the opportunity to do this? And he's not. He's giving it to us. And I don't think that's the right way to go. We have enough trouble dealing with regulation or dealing with cost of water, with various issues we have to deal with that are our hot button issues. To take on this one, I think it's just passed the buck by the state and putting us squarely in the crosshairs on this issue, and then ducking themselves, because I don't think you'll see them come in and defend us or help us. They just pass the buck. I really disagree with them getting away with this kind of subterfuge. So that's me. Jim, you want to talk about it?
Sure. If I were king, I'd pass it yesterday,
Yeah.
but I'm not, and we live in a different type of government. I share the concerns of the mayor. Although this is an issue that I don't know if I'm comfortable with a neutral stance. I'd rather, at least from a committee standpoint, continue to watch this. Because the one thing that I sense from the conversation we've heard right now is we're not neutral on it.
Yeah, I think that's really Tom's argument, is we aren't neutral from his perspective. And I think, Chris, you expressed it as well, too, is we ought to be supporting that. So, this is something you can bring to the council to support. And then those of us who don't want to, don't have to, I mean, that's, I think I tell you, I do believe it's a mistake. I've seen these bills for years coming in front of the legislature to pass it down to a school board or to a city or to anything to get it off their shoe. It's something sticking to them and they won't deal with it. And I think it doesn't bother me to hold their feet to the fire at all. I think this is the coward's way out for the legislature. So, and really handing it to us, you'll have it'll be just a firestorm of argument over issues like this, plus the legal action. And it's only because they won't take the guts to vote this thing out themselves.
I don't disagree with that sentiment. I agree that ideally it would be them, but since they're not willing to, I think we should.
Well, we don't know if they're willing. This isn't a bill. Brian isn't saying, hey, legislature, let's take this up and I'll be voting yes or no on the issue. This is him ducking the issue personally. And his colleagues will love this bill because they don't have to do anything. It's a freebie for them. That's what's the problem here. At least with Ginny Burdick, she has brought the bills where the state makes some decisions over the years. She had the wherewithal to do that, but very few of these guys like doing that. And I don't blame them. They know what the problems are here, know exactly what they are here.
Well, 585 is exactly that. It's Ginny Burdick's bill. It's the same version of this bill, but in the Senate.
Yeah, well, she's learned. She can't get them to vote that way. I still think they ought to keep running at the legislature. They keep trying, and but I understand your position. And then when the council changes its direction in the future, they can turn it back, and people can carry firearms in the park if that's what the public wants to do, or how they perceive the public. I mean, I got a dozen emails on this issue. I don't know how 100,000 or 170,000 Salemites feel about it, but the dozen or so I got indicated they did not like seeing unloaded or any kind of weapons in the parks, and understandably. I mean, it's scary.
Has the League of Oregon Cities made any comment on this?
I haven't seen a position from them yet. Mark, you reviewed this. Have you heard anything from them?
I've not heard anything from them. I've spoken with some individuals in other city attorneys' offices, et cetera. There was a various awareness of this bill, of those who are aware of the bill. Everyone sort of shared the same the same level of concern that it's going to lead to a lot of whatever attempts are made at the local level to regulate firearms is going to be met with in-person challenges in the form of behavior, as well as a lot of very expensive protracted litigation. So that was the sense that I got from other individuals, not about whether or not the benefits of additional regulation or not, but that how it is likely to be ferreted out on the local level.
Okay. Well, what do you want to do? Send it to the council as is and let it just be debated by the council? How do you want to proceed? You want to wait and see how LOC comes down on it? Just not move this one forward yet? We haven't had a chance to hear from Tom, who I know feels quite strongly about it. I don't know. I'm sure open to what he'd like to do.
Is there anything scheduled yet on it, Justin?
Yeah, it looks like there's a public hearing on the, let me make sure I'm looking at the right one. Senate's coming up on the 24th.
So
Tuesday.
585.
Yeah. So vertical heard, it was heard on the House side on the 26th.
It's been heard.
No. It's coming up on the 24th in the Senate. I've got a note here, 126 on my House side, but Nikki said that didn't. When it was introduced. It was introduced. It didn't happen.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Nikki. Yeah, so vertical heard on the 24th. Probably we should listen in on that, report back. We got a little bit of time. We're early in session. We'll see who lines up in the opposition. We'll see who lines up in support, and we'll be able to give council a better sense of that opening hearing.
I'm fine with holding off doing
Are you?
anything until our next meeting.
Okay.
Only a couple days out, so.
Okay. Well, I think it also gives Tom a chance to make his case too. I mean, he really, I think as an attorney, he has a view that may be different than all of us. So I don't know.
His email was pretty clear regarding his position for these two bills. I'd be happy to just follow up with him and clarify that the committee has decided to have a future conversation that he can be present in at the next meeting.
Is that okay? Yeah, okay. Okay.
So then we have House Bill 2006, which is shelter siting. And this is a late arrival, so I'll just leave it to Eunice to address if you have any other insight. I'm sorry that we didn't put together a full evaluation, and maybe Eunice, can you pop in if there are questions?
My understanding is that this extends essentially the 2020 shelter siting. I have not done a deep dive.
3115, do we know if that overturns our sit-lie, the direction we're taking? We're sort of aiming toward, yeah.
That is the, that bill we talked about a little bit last time we got together. And just be aware that that represents kind of a working compromise between the Oregon Law Center, the League of Oregon Cities, and the Association of Oregon Counties. And so it's an attempt on behalf of the speaker to build kind of a compromise about how we would enforce it moving forward. So we are in the city staff, are in sort of an awkward position. This is a working compromise again with the league in the lead, and having it be sponsored by Speaker Kotek. There's a lot of challenge here for us, and it's moving pretty quickly once it gets started. Justin, do you want to add any other political sense to that rough analysis?
No, I mean, it's a speaker's bill, so I mean, we need to be careful. That being said, if we do have concerns, we need to get those in probably to the Senate President's office, assuming this will move over there. Again, there's a ton of work that's going on amongst those interests that Courtney just told us about. But yeah, I think we need to get on the record the concerns that we would have, either implementation or how that would really impact us, so the Senate President knows when it gets over to that side of the legislative process.
Do we have an analysis from the city attorney's office on how it will impact our current ordinance?
We have two primary concerns. One is that in 2023, our timeline to get enough shelter space up is by 2023. And that timeline is not going to shift, we understand. And the second concern was around liability, which I would ask Mark to try to explain. But again, this has been a full summer really of work, back and forth negotiations, and this is the best collectively we could leverage. So Mark, can you speak a little bit to the liability? I don't know that it's fully contained in the draft as it stands.
Yes. So the concern over liability is this is now going to be allowing individuals to shelter in areas of the public spaces that weren't necessarily designed for that. And so there's concern over what liability the city may have regarding individuals who become injured by utilizing the spaces in a way that wasn't intended. My understanding was that there was going to be some liability provisions put into the bill. I looked at the bill that was there. I'm not seeing them in yet. I don't know when those things are going to be implemented. To answer Councillor Hoy's question about how this would impact the city's current sit-lie ordinance, one of the things the city attorney's office did very carefully was to try and make it a civil regulation as opposed to a criminal regulation. The first time that we saw a court within the Ninth Circuit really expand this into non-criminal legislation was the Grants Pass case, where the district court judge out of Eugene said that even though it wasn't a criminal, that it was limited to civil penalties, they brought the Eighth Amendment analysis to that and said that it still violated the Eighth Amendment. That wasn't appealed. And so that remained an open issue. This is going to statutorily expand those protections, the time, place, and manner restrictions that had historically applied under criminal regulations to civil regulations. So there will need to be some retooling, I believe. This is a conversation that I need to have with the city attorney. But I believe that there will be needing to be at least an analysis and possibly some retooling of our sit-lie ordinance. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that this bill will statutorily regulate these ordinances, even though as the contours of the Constitution and the courts sort of define these time, place, and manner regulations and what can and can't be done. This is going to statutorily say that this is a perfect example that if it was appealed and the Supreme Court said no, if it's just financial penalties, it's a civil regulation, that's okay. this bill is going to freeze it and say, no, that isn't okay. You're still subject to these statutory requirements. So that something to consider.
What would be sort of an example of what this would kind of legalize here in Salem? I mean, what's it look like if this is what passes for a sit-lie requirement at this point? Do we have an example we could look at and say, oh, it would look like that? I mean, is the Market Street, that's the state's current hands-off process. Would we have more of those kind of situations? I'm just trying to see what it looks like as we try to make a decision, if we have any examples locally.
And to piggyback, if I can, Mr. Mayor, sorry, Mark, is it better with just the court ruling, or is it better with the statutory overlay that obviously everybody's trying to get passed?
I'm sorry, was that question directed at me, Justin?
Yeah, mine is, right now, the
just-
state has a policy that's a little different than ours. It's more of a hands-off, and we see it manifesting at a number of the overpasses, Market Street, the bridges, things like that. Is that what this looks like if you have it come to life on the ground, or does it look some other way? I'm just not sure. Can you regulate it at the local level? What's it look like?
Well, I believe we'll be able to regulate it, but those regulations are going to have to now, as they've always been, be reasonable time, place, and manner regulations. There's just not, the city is not going to be in a position to ban it in all places at all times. That open question becomes what constitutes reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. And what this bill also does is say you have to be looking at it from the position of the unsheltered individual. That has to factor in. So we will be able to regulate it, but I anticipate that there is going to be more challenges to the regulation, because the other thing that the bill does is allow for challenges to the ordinances even when they haven't been implemented. So it's not an as applied challenge where somebody has been provided a citation for violating the ordinance. Groups can come in, see that we have regulations on the book, and even if we're not implementing them, can initiate legal actions against the city challenging them. And also, if the city is found that its ordinance is out of compliance with the statutes, they can seek attorney fees for that. So
time, place, and manner, then, would that be resolved? I'm just curious what that looks like. You've got people camping along Liberty sidewalk, on the Liberty Street sidewalk, and we make saying that's not a correct time, place, and manner. The correct time, place, and manner is in the West Salem Park, in an undeveloped area of the West Salem Park, or some other area, or it's over at some other location, is an appropriate time, place, and manner. Can we do that or not?
I think where we'll have to look at is, are we providing enough space in enough space to accommodate our unsheltered population in a way that they can meaningfully access it as well. So I think requiring unsheltered residents or unsheltered individuals in our city to, let's say, go several miles away when they wouldn't have the means to get there, we're going to have some issues. So we're also going to have to be able to defend why it is we're not allowing it within certain areas of our city, and we have always been careful to do that with our ordinances. we're going to have to just be careful about the level of burden we place on the unsheltered individuals to comply with our ordinance. If it becomes, at some point, it becomes too onerous for them to comply, we're going to have an issue.
And the other thing that's specified is that we have to have those we have to have those accessible spaces ready by 2023. So there are a lot of pieces to this that are challenging, and it was the best that the League of Oregon Cities, Association of Oregon Counties could get in terms of compromise. And so the league is not going to be opposing this. So just, there's a lot of context, and we are hyper aware of the challenges with it, but it is a compromise, and the league will not be opposing.
Okay. Any other?
So the
Right
question
now,
for
you're
you
just
guys-
saying, don't do anything and we'll get more information later?
That would be the staff recommendation. Again, that's not informed by a political lens. And so that's really your choice if you wish us to do something different. But for right now, it would be just to continue to watch.
And my only question, Courtney, for you, Mark, was, is this legislation actually a lesser of two evils than just the overriding Martin v. Boise case?
I'm always concerned about trying to legislate constitutional mandates because the Constitution and how it's interpreted is a constant evolution. So when they start bringing in things like we're going to apply this to civil regulations as well, that's a contour that I could see changing if this was if the Grants Pass case had been appealed. They specifically say in this legislation that the reasonableness of the legislation needs to be based on the totality of the circumstances, including but not limited to the impact of the law on persons experiencing homelessness. The reasonableness of the regulation has always been sort of a totality of the circumstances, but I don't know where that legislative emphasis of including the impact of the law on persons experiencing homelessness, I could foresee a body of statutory interpretation on that running different than general constitutional analysis. So I've got concerns, but as Courtney has mentioned, this is designed to have been a compromise bill. And so I'm anticipating it will see a lot of, and the League of the Cities is supporting it. So I'll leave it at that. My preference would have been to have not had the current state of constitutional law be reduced to a state statute. Although it to a certain extent follows just by saying reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions, which is the state of the constitutional law, there is some additional things that are specifically being statutorily embodied here outside of the contours of the constitutional law.
So you want to take this to the city council in its current condition, or do you want to wait and go to the council later, Courtney?
I would prefer not to take it, but that is entirely up to you.
What do you guys think?
I'm fine with holding off for now.
Okay.
I am too.
Okay. So we'll take those two bills. Well, they will join our two gun bills as we'll come back to you after our next meeting, or as soon as we have more information or a better thing. And that doesn't mean we won't have somebody try to bring one up. I mean, I certainly respect Tom's ability to bring it up and a majority of the council to move forward on all these if they want to. I mean, it's their But what they'll get as a report will not include these bills at this point.
Yes, and so if it's okay with you, I'd like to just, I have a scorecard on the side, kind of like baseball, but I want to just check in and make sure I've got it right because our turnaround time is pretty tight. So
Right.
we're taking forward is House Bill 2004 about the NAV Center with a support 1, House Bill 2283 and Senate Bill 458 about land division, support with amendments. House Bill 2307 is a watch. I have House Bill 2398 for building codes, the REACH building codes, that's a support 1. I have House Bill 2417, mobile crisis with a support 1. I have House Bill 2447 and Senate Bill 108 with a support 1. And I think those are the historic. Yes. And then we're taking forward House Bill 2739 and House Bill 3089. Those are the utility relief program. And then them we're going to be watching and get back to you next time.
On the rest of them?
Yes. Does that meld with?
Yeah,
Sorry,
I think so.
I think so. Does that?
That comports with my recollection as well. I'd like to back up to 2004 for just a minute. I understand there's a hearing coming up on that next week. I would like to offer to testify on the city's behalf on that bill.
we're
Which
prepared.
one's that? Is that?
That's the NAV Center.
one for the
5
Navigation
million
Center.
for the NAV Center.
Oh, yeah.
And we're preparing
Whatever,
some
Council
testimony
President.
for you right now.
Yeah. Why don't we do that? That one is coming up. Yeah, if you
8
don't mind
o'clock
doing
Tuesday
it.
morning.
Okay.
We're preparing because
So on that one, I'd like to have on that NAV Center one, it noted that we're going to send Councilor Hoy in to do the testimony on behalf of the city. I think when we do these, as we do identify, I'd like to make sure the council knows who's been designated hitter on this thing. We may have others. We do have some Lone Rangers and freelancers that may pop up, but I think we really ought to have the who's designated hitter on this stuff.
excellent. And we are doing that. When we do that, Councilor Hoy, we were recognizing you as council president, chair of the Willamette Valley Housing Initiative, and I think there was something else that escapes me.
Well,
but
the housing authority, he's chairman of
Chair
the
of
housing
the
authority as
authority.
well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
I
have
do-
all three of those because I think that really adds to why we're sending him.
You broke up for a moment, Courtney. Just to clarify, I'm the vice chair of the Mid-Willamette Valley Homelessness Alliance. I don't know if you actually said that. I couldn't hear you.
I did say it. I apologize for the spotty internet. I'm so glad to have it restored, and it's still a little buggy. Thank you.
And then
Okay.
Courtney, you and I will take that big piece of information we got in my email box, get that into a letter to the committee, and then we'll condense a version for Councilor Hoy.
Yes,
So
Yeah.
he can hit the highlights of that, not read the whole thing
Yeah.
in there.
of course.
You and I will do that.
Yes.
Awesome.
Okay, so I will just button up a report to the full council for Monday night and we'll move forward. Thank you so much for your time today.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, are we adjourned? Oh, Chris, did you want to? Oh. Okay,
Just
We're
wait.
adjourned.
Goodbye.
bye-bye.